When I first watched a wild tiger for a long time, I became sort of blurry-eyed and quite tearful.
It took my breath away and there was silence and I could hear nothing except just watch the tiger move in gracefully. I was transfixed.
You know, it's a symbol of ultimate power in Indian jungles. The pull of a tiger, it's so magnetic that it can be felt by anybody who looks at this beautiful creature even for a few seconds.
Well, I was fortunate. I had two rather indulgent parents who loved the jungles, loved wildlife, and my mother was a very eminent conservationist. So it was part of our lives. And I was about 14 years old when I announced to my parents that, I hated school and I was going to be a wildlife photographer. And they said, but that's not a career. And I said, I'll make it a career.
I think there was a natural affinity. I was in the film industry, Bombay film industry for some time also, and then I moved away because there was a lot of attraction, if I may say, an affinity with nature. And I had made the first film just after Project Tiger had come.
Well, I was born in Calcutta, and amazingly, my parents took me to tiger jungles in Bihar when I was just a few days old. I was 2.5 weeks old. And it was in the month of April, in the height of the summer. And in those days, there was no communication, there was no, there were no doctors, there were barely roads and no electricity. But that they felt that was I was a tough little baby, and off I went.
I was a bit amateurish in my attempts to get closer to a tiger, mainly via photography. But I really wanted to do, in a structured manner, something which I would not have done as a news person. So I thought that I would go deeper into wildlife filmmaking.
I spent much of my childhood in the jungle, listening to jungle sounds. And so I sort of remember from a very early age becoming sort of obsessed by this mysterious animal, because you hear tigers occasionally, particularly in the winter months, when they're calling and so on. And I was very young when I really did become obsessed by the tiger.
And there were a lot of cases of poaching at the time also, and also of animals encroaching, coming into homes and people dying. And that triggered off lots of things and a lot of thoughts in my mind. And I said, okay, I need to concentrate, generate awareness about nature, the world we live in, about the animals that we share the planet with. And that was the beginning of a great journey, and I think a wonderful journey. And I'm just still, I go on my knees every time I turn the page of nature's incredible designs on this planet.
Me and my team, we made different documentaries. One was a series with Tom Alter. It was called Jungle Ki Kahaniyan. in which we took Alter Saab to different forests, and he would, in his own impeccable style, would explain the the beauty of the jungle and the beauty of the tiger.
Project Tiger had just been declared in 1973, and as you say rightly, people were not aware of the role the natural world, animals for example, played in our lives. Nobody was even vaguely aware of the delicate and fragile web of life that supports all life on earth. We need animals to survive. We were under the notion, most of us were, that when we were occupied trying to generate an income to stay alive, and none of us was aware that our life depends on creatures, insects, animals. We don't run the world. And the word conservation was not even around.
After the Wildlife Protection Act came in 1972, followed by the launch of Project Tiger, those were really the golden years of both tiger conservation and the protection of these large habitats, wildlife habitats in India. And it wasn't till the sort of terrible demand for tiger bones hit India, and the demand of course came from China, that things changed drastically. And then, very surreptitiously, these tigers started disappearing. So in 1993, I started looking into this and thinking, where have my friends gone?
Natural behavior of the tiger is important. When you go in a jeep and as a tourist and look at tigers, they look at you, you snap and hooray, it's a great thing. But to catch a tiger or tigress unaware, and especially with a family, is a different treat. Frolicking in the water, playing, they look like cats, pussy cats, And you want to reach out and touch because there's so much heart in there.
Like human beings, tigers have their own personality, their own individual streak, During the filmmaking, I came across lots of very interesting tigers. One of them was named Kalua. I still remember the tiger. So I saw him a couple of times, many times in fact.
I made two films on tigers with my then partner and husband. First one was in 1976. Tigers were still a bit shy and so on. And then we made a 1-hour special for National Geographic. And that was marvelous. It took 2.5 years. And that was sort of living with wild tigers day in, day out. And it was the first sort of intimate documentary on wild tigers. And I think my most privileged moment was when a tigress we call Bansuri, she had cubs, but she was quite shy and we didn't see the cubs a lot. And then she started to be more comfortable. She knew the sound of our vehicle. In those days we also used elephants. And there was one afternoon, and it was quite late and quite sort of glowing orange light. And suddenly she just walked out in front of us, followed by her cubs. And right in front of us, she lay down beside this big rock, and she started suckling her cubs. And for me, that was probably the most sort of privileged moment of my life.
I think when you see an amazing creature that you know so little about, and you are discovering its idiosyncrasies, habits and behavior just as you're filming, you do get captivated and captured, and then you suddenly lose all rationality and begin to realize that that's a mother looking after cubs. So a mother tending to 5 cubs in Ranthambore is a sight that I cannot get out of my mind. It's etched in my mind, and the tender care with which a mother picks her babies and moves, and her protection. She was about 100 meters away, and we just turned a corner, and she had 2 cubs, and she charged those 100 meters straight at me with the loudest, blood-curdling growl that you've ever seen. That's a mother being protective about her cubs, and I had encroached. And she stopped at about 10, 12 feet away from me and swished her tail and opened her huge mouth and snarled, and I got a cold look. And I was transfixed. It was just like a slow motion thing happening, and she rushed back. That was a warning to me to stay out. That's a mother protecting its young ones. And the second time she would have charged, and the third time I would have gone. But by that time I think some instinct took over and I moved backwards. It was not a move that I made consciously, but there was an automatic gear that made me reverse back. And I was with Fateh Singh, who's one of the greatest tiger men of India, and we were filming. And in those days you could walk into the jungle and you could trek also, and stay away from the dangerous areas, habitats, but if you were with forest people you could walk in, and that was an encounter that is embedded in the soul, in the heart, in the mind. Awesome.
I think the one I loved the most was a male tiger called Saja, who was just I don't know. All I had to do was find his pug marks. He had quite clear individual pug marks, and close the jeep, turn the key, and sit there, and 8 out of 10 times he would just pad out of the jungle and come and sit beside the jeep in the shade. And it got so that I would take out a book and read a book, and I would talk to him. Project Tiger was one of the greatest conservation initiatives that have ever happened in the world. But personally, I don't think Project Tiger moved with the times. It was very slow to recognize the poaching problem and poaching for the illegal wildlife trade, which was very sinister, very well organized. You know, these were organized criminals. It was slow to react and to that, and I think now it's sort of desperately trying to catch up with the conflict issue, because conflict is a very difficult management problem. You have crowds. Nowadays we all have mobile phones. There are mobile phones in all the villages, which weren't there before. So within 20 minutes you can have a crowd of 2,000 people, while either an injured tiger or there's been, you know, an attack or whatever. So it becomes a huge management problem, a huge crowd control problem.
You see, there are many rules and regulations all over, and you see Project Tiger, and there are strict regulations, law, and you go to jail if you kill a tiger. It's a protected animal, but tigers are still dying. The paradox is, in spite of all these rules and regulations, there's lack of political will, enforcement. There's need for more forest guards if you want to enforce this. So there are many gray areas which need to be addressed. Unfortunately, they're not being addressed.
Say till about a decade ago, you know, the future of the tiger was hanging by a very thin thread. There were hardly 1,400 left. Now there are 4,000 plus. I will not say that tiger is still out of the hole, but obviously the position is much better now. But we have a different set of problems now. For instance, space crunch. In places like Ranthambore, even Corbett, there are too many tigers now jostling for space, you know, because tiger being a territorial animal, a territory can hold only that many number of tigers. Now that tigers have increased, but the territory more or less remains the same. So where do these tigers go?
Habitat loss is one prime factor for all the human deaths, unnecessary deaths that are taking place. And these need to be addressed on an emergency level. I mean, we all need the environment to survive. We need the jungles around us. They're the homes of the most enigmatic species on the planet. And we have the largest numbers of tigers in the world. So the onus is on us to protect the world's heritage.
You know, for the people who are living on the border areas of, in the border areas of national parks and reserves, they have to be told about a few more things as to, their thinking has to be changed. You know, some attempt has to be made to bring this, you know, holistic view of how they have to conduct themselves, how they have to respect the wildlife, to give more respect to the wildlife. And I'm sure for this problem, the NGOs and you know, the other private stakeholders, they can play a major role.
These are all things, these are big management problems, which are how to curb poaching and how to curb conflict, how to curb encroachment. They all need not just strong policies, they need good training and motivation and good political backup. Even to this day, there's a hesitation to deal with the poaching problem. And you can see why, because if you're a manager, you know, a director of a tiger reserve, and you do a poaching case, a successful poaching case, you see some skins, you arrest some people, there's still a sort of a blame game.
Now there are again two kinds of poaching. One is what you call pot hunting. which a villager resorts to take care of his family. And the other is, of course, when you kill a tiger or an elephant or any other animal for its body parts. So that is, we are talking about organized poaching. That thing, I'm afraid it's still there, and our law enforcement agencies have yet to take big strides in this measure.
We made a few films on poaching, and we interviewed poachers who had killed, one limited to killing 27 tigers and selling them for 5,000 rupees. But the mafia is a real culprit, not the very poor tribal community. You see, this is a very vicious cycle. So until the livelihood of local communities is addressed properly and they're not exploited, unless we empower those local communities who just want a square meal a day perhaps, poaching will continue.
In the last few years, there has been all these conservation efforts and the kind of publicity they have generated, the interest they have generated, particularly among the younger crowd. I think that is something really good, because now the tiger, which so far was just an exotic animal which very few people had seen, now it has come much into the public domain. Tiger is now no more a mysterious creature, So now it's something that people, you and I, we are aware of, and I think this kind of publicity has done lots of good for the tiger and its future.
Well, I think India should be very proud of what we've achieved. It's much easier to criticize something than to praise it. But I think I think we should be very proud of the fact that tiger numbers have gone up. There's a bit of a concern that tiger numbers have gone up outside tiger reserves, in places like Chandrapur district, for instance, and so on. The villagers are very, very alarmed by the numbers of tigers that are now wandering around their villages. So that has to be dealt with, and that has to be, the people need to feel safe. In India, villagers have lived for centuries and centuries and centuries with wild tigers, and I think on International Tiger Day, my one wish is that amazing coexistence and tolerance can continue and can blossom.
You see, awareness has been generated, and the general public is aware to a greater extent, and I'm very happy to say, especially the younger generations. People in Europe and America, 47% of the population is aware of environmental concerns, as against 67% in India, especially rural India. And that was only because programs reached the grassroots, empowering them and also making them understand why the environment, wildlife, nature, and intact ecosystem was crucial to their own survival.
In the past couple of years, a few very important steps have been taken by the stakeholders, the agencies, and primarily by the state governments. I'm talking about the tiger corridors. For instance, much needed corridor between Ranthambore and Mukundra Tiger Reserve in Rajasthan. I'm told that it's now a reality. And similarly, you have in central India, tiger corridors being created, say between Kana and Achanakmagh, and Kana and Pench, and very recently Uttarakhand, which has like 2 tiger reserves, Corbett and Rajaji. It recently announced setting up of 2 more reserves, Nandor and Surai.
like to live in a world without tigers. For me, it's something that it inspires me, it excites me, it's my heart racing. I mean, I think, not only are they, not only are they the most charismatic mammal on this planet, but they also represent all the other species and living organisms that live in their domain.
The tiger is the apex of the food chain. It controls the equilibrium of the forest ecosystem, especially in India, which ensures that everything is in a balance. If the tiger goes, the forest will fall apart, they'll fragment. And when that happens, whether it's our pollination, which comes from bees, or whether it's our water, which comes from the forest, and the quality of air and the amount of air will all begin to degrade and fall. And we will have actually rung the bell on our own extinction. The human race will go then.